everyone to the Perimenopause Athletes and Beyond Masterclass series, where we are bringing together experts on just so much, really just so many things: training, nutrition, recovery, acupuncture, and today on really specifically on female physiology. And I am so thrilled to have you, Dr. Anna, to join us here and talking really about perimenopause and hormones. And so welcome.
Thank you. And I'm delighted to be here, and I'm getting over a cold a little bit. So if I start coughing in the middle of what I'm saying, I have a glass of water right here.
Good. Well, let me tell everybody a little bit more about you. So Dr. Anna Garrett is a specialist, really a specialist in perimenopause and in hormones. And she comes to it with a Doctor of Pharmacy degree and is a board certified pharmacotherapy specialist. And, with that, she also has 20 years of experience. She uses functional medicine in her practice, which includes hormone balancing, weight loss, gut health, and health coaching. Basically, you help women stop suffering. Like, really? That's the thing. That's your point. That's the thing that you do. And I love it. In a past interview, you said perimenopause lasts 5 to 10 years, maybe longer. We're going to talk about that. And so that's a long time to be miserable. And I think here. So if part of this whole series is to give you and empower you with information so you can stop suffering. And what I'm excited about is that Dr. Anna Garrett really goes into that there's ways to do this. Hallelujah. There's ways to stop suffering. And if we do that, then we get to do more of what we love with more vitality, and that's sports, and that's being active. And so that's what we're going to get into today. Is there anything else that I should have let our listeners know about you?
I don't think so, because we're going to talk about my book at some point, I think. So,
we are going to talk about your book. Well, I'm going to talk about it right now because I get really excited about my speakers, and I guess you might be sensing that. But Dr. Anna Garrett, I bought her book because it was, when I first read it, I'm like, oh, that looks like a really useful tool for my athletes. I need to know what's in there. And this book is, it just goes through it all. And what's amazing is, and we're going to talk about some of these things, is like, what are the things that you didn't know that you might be suffering because of perimenopause? And you go into it. You get right into it. So yes, perimenopause, the Savvy Sister's Guide to Hormone Harmony. You're not too young, you're not alone, and we've got this. And so that's a perfect way to start the interview. So we're going to dig right in, and can you help us understand perimenopause? When does it start? How early does that start? And how do we get to know, all of a sudden there's something going on?
Well, it can start as early as your mid 30s, a little more commonly late 30s, early 40s. And so what happens is your hormones begin to shift and you stop ovulating every month, which doesn't mean you don't have a period. You can still have a period and not ovulate. But when you don't ovulate, then your progesterone levels fall, and estrogen then is allowed to run the show in your body the whole month. And what that results in is things like just crazy crime scene periods, and weight gain, and anxiety, and mood swings, and fatigue, and insomnia. And so a lot of women, when they get these things, they'll go to their doctor and say, I'm having, XYZ. The doctor's not thinking perimenopause because you're 38. And they're going, well, let's put you on the birth control pill, and which is a Band-Aid when you actually need some hormones, or there are some lifestyle things you can do to balance it out at that early stage too. But so that period can last 5 to 10 years, because the average age of menopause, which is one day of your life, it's the day that marks a year since your last period. And so the whole run up to that can last 5 to 10 years. You and I were talking before we started. There was one study that showed that African American women can actually experience this for as long as 14 years and have worse symptoms. So it's, every 100% of women will go through this if they live long enough, unless they have a hysterectomy, and then they're going to get their own different kind of menopause. So,
right.
which that's a whole nother webinar. But yes, so it can start as early as your late 30s, early 40s, last 5 to 10 years. You hit menopause, and then everything after that is postmenopause. And all the while, your progesterone is the first one to go, and then your estrogen starts to fall, and then your testosterone starts to fall. So by the time you get to menopause, the odds are that all of your hormone levels are going to be fairly low. And in a perfect world, they all sort of gradually fall together. But because we're exposed to toxins in our environment, and some of us don't eat as well as we could, or we drink a lot of alcohol, then things can still stay out of balance. And if you're overweight, your fat cells make estrogen. So you've got that to contend with as well.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit? So you just actually mentioned that, like, so your fat cells are producing estrogen. And, one common thing that's happening to women is we start to gain a little bit more weight. Can that be a healthful approach to trying to build up a little bit more estrogen, or your body's like way of saying, you're going to go on a roller coaster here, ladies. We're going to go up and then down. Is there any sort of reason like that our body is actually fighting to hold on to weight?
Normally your body is fighting to hold on to weight if you are in flight or fight mode, which has more to do with your cortisol than anything else.
Right.
And the other piece of it is when women gain weight, they tend to cut back their calories that they're eating, often very dramatically, which can shoot you in the foot because your body perceives that as starvation. It elevates your cortisol, and everything settles around your middle. So when I'm teaching weight loss to my clients, we make sure that they're eating enough calories, because then that gives your body the signal that, hey, it's okay if I release some of this weight. So that's more of a cortisol issue.
Yeah, interesting. So it could be, it's like trying to figure out where to start, right? And with athletes, it's like a double whammy, because then athletes often take on this sort of like, okay, well, I'm just going to work harder.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to eat less and I'm going to work harder. And I'm just going to, put myself into a total chaotic state and then going forward. So is that what you see as well with some of your clients that you work with?
Yeah. So when we test, the testing that I do looks at cortisol as well as the sex hormones. And I have some women whose cortisol levels are just flat, and they're still just exercising like crazy women, and they're eating 1,000 calories a day. And I'm like, we can't fix this without really ramping down the exercise, ramping up the food. So
right.
Or the quality of the food.
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act. But I have I've had several clients who had almost no cortisol, and they're like, yeah, I'm doing CrossFit 4 days a week. And I'm like,
yeah.
How do you feel after you do that?
Right.
I'm exhausted the rest of the day. And I'm like, it's probably not the best thing to be doing, because you should feel energized after a workout, as because that's your area of expertise.
Right. Give you energy, don't take it away. But how do we balance that when there's so much going on with our hormones? And so that leads me into the next question. It's so perfect, because when do women really need, we always need to be aware of our health and, blah, blah, blah. But let's talk about perimenopause specifically. And when is it that we need to really start paying attention to understanding what's, coming into our bodies, and being aware of these symptoms? Like you mentioned 35. Is there anything more you want to say about that, of like, how do we start to have a different relationship with our body? Or Is there anything else in there that we should know?
Um, so, this was the biggest challenge of marketing my book. It was for women who didn't know they needed it. So, right. So I would say, if you're in your early to mid 30s, if you are not starting to at least educate yourself about what's coming, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you have a chance at that point to really look at your lifestyle, because that's the foundation. Supplements, hormones, that's all on top of the foundation, because you can't out supplement a really crappy lifestyle. So that's an opportunity to really put what you're doing under a microscope and make some different choices, knowing that that is going to set you up to have a much more pleasant experience as you go through perimenopause. Because if you can get on top of it to start with, then you're pretty much golden.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely, you hit it the nail on the head. It's like, how can we change this conversation so we actually do prevention? I mean, that's such a wrong word for something that we all naturally go through, but how do we empower ourselves? So let's would you give us one of the lesser known symptoms, and then one of the more common symptoms, maybe even a symptom that women, I don't know if there is one that women come into and notice first, like at the very beginning of their, perimenopausal journey. Is there a more common symptom that women face initially, or is it real, like full gamut? Everybody has something different.
Everybody has something different, but there are some pretty common themes. So new anxiety or new insomnia are very, very common. And those are the things that will get somebody to her doctor, where you come away with an antidepressant or a little dose of Xanax or, whatever. Some uncommon things are burning mouth syndrome. So hormone levels can affect the tissue in your mouth and make it feel like it's on fire. That can also be a deficiency of B vitamins. So you got to kind of tease out what's what.
Right.
Feeling like you have things crawling on your skin. See, now I've never had either one of these things, but
Yeah.
here are just some wacko things that start to happen.
Yeah. And okay, so let's go to that, to the first example of the more common things, and anxiety. So can you share with us how does that feel? How do we recognize it and kind of tease it apart from our normal, like, I have so many responsibilities and I'm like totally stressed out and I don't know, how am I going to get all my life done? And starting to say, oh, there's something going on with my hormones. Is there
yeah. So, I mean, you kind of know what your baseline anxiety level is, right?
Okay,
I mean, most of us do. So if that starts to ramp up and be out of the ordinary, or you start having panic attacks, or you wake up in the middle of the night and you're just like, oh my God. And, it's one of those sit straight up in bed kinds of things. Your mind just ruminates and ruminates and you worry about every little thing.
Okay.
Progesterone is one of our calming hormones. And so when that level drops, you don't have progesterone to get in your brain and keep it calm. So it's something that's out of the norm for what your baseline is.
Right.
So if you're a sound sleeper and all of a sudden you're like looking at the ceiling all night, that's not normal.
That is not normal. No. And that's when, so, coming back to, okay, so how do we, what do we start to do about this? And I'm going to lead this into the next question. And so take it how you want, but there's two things that I really want to talk to you about. And it's that, it's your profession and what you're doing in hormone testing, and understanding what the heck is going on and what we as women can do to start teasing out. It's like, okay, so now I know I'm aware I have anxiety. What do I do next with this? And how do I start getting the help that I need?
So, if I don't answer all parts of this, just bring it back to me. So like with something such as anxiety, if you're a big caffeine drinker, for instance, it's like, okay, well, that's probably not serving me as well as it could. Sugar is another thing that can make that much worse. Um, so those are a couple of lifestyle things. Really beginning to have some sort of self-care practice that is grounding. So a
Mhm.
lot of people enjoy meditation. I'm not one of those people, but like for me, it's going out and taking pictures. And I'm obviously I can't do that all the time, but just doing something that brings down, you know, ramps down that anxiety level.
Mhm.
If you get to a point where you're just not dealing with it, I mean, therapy can be very helpful. Best money I've ever spent. And then there are herbs that can help. So things like holy basil or adaptogenic herbs. So it really depends on what the underlying cause of that anxiety is. So is it progesterone or are you having cortisol issues? Because those would be the most likely things. Hyperthyroidism can actually cause anxiety too, but in the population that is listening to this, hypothyroidism is much, much more common than hyper. Um, Although, with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune disease, you can have periods of high and low. And so
Mhm.
just throw that into the pot as well.
Right.
Okay, so what was the second part?
Well, how do we start to tease out what the issues are? Like, and because I can also throw in one fascinating thing that a lot of people don't know is overtraining and
Mm.
perimenopause have a major overlap here and of symptoms. And so one of the things that I, work with my clients to do is like, okay, so how do we go about teasing out this cortisol, or is it that your progesterone is really low? Like I'm sending my clients to you, and what kind of experience, what sort of things do people go out and look for? Who comes to you?
So I have usually two flavors of clients, the ones that want to be proactive and get a baseline and move forward from there. And then I have the ones that are deep in the thick of it and they're miserable, their quality of life is terrible, and they are at their wits' end, and their regular medical physician is not serving them in any way because they don't know what to do.
Right.
And that's not uncommon. It doesn't mean that it's a bad doctor. It means that it is an untrained doctor. And that is the majority of the doctors that are out there. Um, so when somebody comes to me, I usually use the Dutch test. That's a urine test. You do it at home. It's very simple. And we look at the sex hormones and the way your body breaks those down and eliminates them.
Mhm.
And then the same thing with cortisol. And then we also do a select number of organic acids that look at B vitamins, some neurotransmitters, melatonin. So it's a very comprehensive look at all of the hormones that play with each other when it comes to midlife.
Right.
Because there's no way to like really tease out one thing just by assuming that that's the one thing. They all relate to each other. And then I also will generally have my clients get blood work to do a full thyroid panel, not a TSH, a full thyroid panel, because that gives the whole picture. If they have had especially heavy periods, I'll have them get a ferritin check to check their iron stores. So it really depends on what the situation is, but it's a combination of the urine testing and then any blood work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I can set all that up for people. And, it's kind of like one-stop shopping. So I package everything together along with 3 consultations with me. And then we can certainly work together beyond that if there are issues that continue to need to be addressed.
And then you provide them with like the point is if they're really deep in the thick of it, then you're going to, you're likely, I'm asking, this is a question, I guess, you're likely going to need some support beyond
Mhm.
real food to get you out of it.
Yeah.
And then to get to a stable baseline there. If you are doing more preventative, then it's to just do more of things that you will, promote your healthy lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. So I have one question about the testing. Is one thing I get a bit confused about is, the time. So you do your Dutch test, and it's one point in time. And in perimenopause, do we need to think about the difference between our follicular phase and our luteal phase, or where the testing is done? And how do you account for that?
So the Dutch test is done on day 19 to 21 of a 28-day cycle. If somebody is shorter or longer, then we adjust for that.
Okay.
If somebody has very irregular periods and they're fairly young, I'll usually have them use an ovulation predictor kit to catch the LH surge, and then we test 5 days after that.
Okay.
If somebody is more toward the 50 end of things and they're having 2 periods a year, we just do it because there's probably no progesterone to catch. So,
Right. Okay.
So yes, there is some timing involved in that.
Okay, that's because it's really you're wanting to see what's happening with that progesterone in there, because that is again coming. And maybe could you tell us a little bit about how the yin and the yang of estrogen and progesterone and how they work together, and kind of that idea of balance, or what is balance when we talk about estrogen and progesterone?
So in our perfect world, this is how it works. So you have your period and then all of your hormone levels are low. And then testosterone tends to stay more or less the same all month. There can be a little blip and at the middle of the cycle, but estrogen will start to rise and cause your uterine lining to grow in preparation for pregnancy. And then in the middle of your cycle, you ovulate. And that egg makes a corpus, what's called the corpus luteum, and that secretes progesterone. And so at that point, estrogen starts to dip, and then progesterone starts to rise if you have ovulated, so that it is higher than estrogen. So it's counterbalancing it. And if it's not counterbalancing it, then the estrogen makes that uterine lining just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. So that's where the crime scene periods come from. So in the luteal phase, your progesterone is higher than the estrogen, and then they start to come down. If you don't get pregnant, the estrogen falls pretty quickly, and that's what signals your body to have a period.
Right. So that, I mean, you really hit it on the head there. When we stop ovulating, progesterone is not balancing out that estrogen. And we can also see things like estrogen dominance, or
yes,
that's the idea of balance. Like, one of the challenges in perimenopause is that we really aren't in balance, because that progesterone and estrogen don't have the rise and the fall. Right. And so is part of the work you do, and in finding and being able to understand what's going on in your body, then to really help you metabolize that estrogen, and help you build up, like thinking about how to deal with it. Right.
Right. So what the beauty of the Dutch test is it identifies, it shows you how your body goes through phase 1 and phase 2 metabolism. And are those pathways being optimally used? Are they backed up? If you're constipated, then we start there, because you have to fix the backups in reverse order, because you don't want to fix phase 1, have somebody be constipated, and all of a sudden they're recirculating all these, estrogen metabolites, because that's not good. So that's one of the beautiful things about the Dutch test that you can't get from blood work. And what one of the things doctors will say to their patients is, well, we don't test hormone levels because they're changing all the time and it doesn't matter. I'm not looking for the absolute levels necessarily. I'm looking at the relationships of the hormones to each other, because, if they're out of balance, chances are they're going to be out of balance the whole month. You're not going to suddenly just make a bunch of progesterone to counterbalance a really, really high estrogen level. And so with estrogen, there are a lot of different things we can do. We can get a lot more fiber into somebody's diet, because that helps move things through, because estrogen is ultimately eliminated in bowel movements. So we want to make sure we take care of any constipation. We can use DIM or calcium D-glucarate to support phase 1 and phase 2. make sure that somebody's not exposing themselves to toxins, which come from, sunscreens and pesticides and plastics and all of those things that act like hormone mimickers and sit in the estrogen receptors, and your estrogen can't do its job. So, sorry, my dog is now going crazy.
It's totally okay.
Welcome to Working From Home, friends.
Okay, this is you. Thank you so much. You're really like helping us understand not just what's going on in our bodies, but also how do we go and approach practitioners like yourself so we can get that support. You pointed out one other thing that I'd love to just speak to rather quickly, because I still have other questions. It's already coming to the end of our 30 minutes, if you can believe it. So that's advocating for yourself and advocating to your doctor. Like, so that's a part of the work that you do, is it not? Is like helping women come with questions so that they are able to,
Yes. And I've even gone as far as giving them the exact language to use. It always just fascinates me that doctors are so resistant to letting somebody try something. And I usually suggest to my clients that they present something as, well, let's do this as an experiment for 3 or 4 months and see if it makes a difference. Yes, I can give them the questions to ask. And I mean, you don't have to have a medical degree to go in and have a conversation about hormones. And, the truth of the matter is that doctor is really working for you, and you're in charge of your body 24/7. And so I never suggest that. I'll have people in my group say, I'm going to go in and demand blah, blah, blah. No, don't go in and demand anything. Just have a conversation, because your doctor is a person too, and nobody wants to be treated that way. And you're much more likely to get what you want if you can have a rational conversation about the options.
Yeah. Bring your curiosity.
Bring your curiosity.
Being like, I just really want to investigate, and understand, because I know that there's something that's shifted, and you do help in helping us understand that, so that it's perfect. It's really perfect. All right. So because we're almost at the end, I have some questions for you. I'm asking everyone I'm interviewing. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. So the first one is, give us one moment of courage.
For myself?
Yeah, you.
When I decided to step away from my full-time job and start this business, not knowing if I could replace a pharmacist's salary or not.
Well, you're a trailblazer. It's hard to be trailblazers. It's talking about things that people don't talk about. It is trying to change the language around what we are doing. And it's definitely going up against different models. So thank you for your courage in that way.
Thank you.
And writing your book for people like me and all of us. So tell us one thing that you're grateful for right now.
I'm grateful for the daffodils that are blooming in my yard right now.
You're before us.
They're my favorite flower, and they're just perfect.
And deer don't eat them.
We don't have deer. We have bears.
Okay. What is one piece of advice that you would have for yourself? Like if you go back as you're approaching perimenopause, or, it could even be beyond. What is one piece of advice you wish you had for yourself?
Well, I wish I had known that this even existed, because when I was 35, I was like clueless. This was not anywhere on my radar screen. And so I would say, educate yourself about what is to come, and just recognize that suffering is optional. And there is plenty that you can do without spending a fortune to help yourself feel better.
That's so perfect. You have provided all of our listeners with a free gift. And let me tell you, everybody listening, get on board with this free gift. It's the first chapter of her book. I use it. It's awesome. So basically in that first chapter, do you want to tell us anything about it, about that first chapter and what they can expect?
Well, the title of it is, What is This Fresh Hell? So
They're just so perfect.
It really just gets into the myriad of things that you might experience,
Yeah.
and then the physiological changes that go on as a result of becoming a midlife woman. And then we get into the chapters that follow are about specifics of weight gain and mental health and period changes and all that kind of stuff. So it's really just the setup for everything that comes after that.
Yeah, and it is a really it's an easy read. I mean, it's
Mhm.
easy to access. So that's what's also really great about your book. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Where can people find you?
At drannagarrett.com.
Mhm.
I also have a private Facebook group called the Hormone Harmony Club on Facebook, obviously. And so that is a group where we're talking about perimenopause and menopause 24/7. There's 7,600 women in there now. I'm
Yeah.
on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on
All that stuff.
all the things.
All that stuff. It's so great. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time and your energy, and for really, really cementing that we do not have to suffer. Thank you.
And I'm so grateful that you invited me to do this.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely, we've got to get the message out, and I know you're definitely doing your part. And so thank you for that. And until next time, enjoy.
Thank you all.
Bye.